Welcome to the story of Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop. This is Chapter 15, Villainous Bureaucracy. We're going to start the last big section of the book with a look at three of the evil forces aligning against Millie. Two you've already met, and one is someone new. I'm the author, Ray Dubicki, happy to read this story to you. We can let Millie take a break for this chapter. You can join Millie Salmon on Patreon or find more at milliesalmon.com, and you can follow this podcast and other stories on social media at Infinite Shop Limited. Chapter 15, Villainous Bureaucracy. Special Agent Wesley Simmons was not a stranger to civilian oversight tribunals. These little hearings called agents and managers to examine the processes they went through, and Agent Simmons very much thought they made the Bureau a stronger organization. Sunshine is a great antiseptic, even if it was super secret sunshine that occurred in the basement of a nondescript federal contractor's suburban compound. They were not in a strictly civilian oversight tribunal today, however. The ratio of badges to medals was skewed. Around this horseshoe table, chairs normally filled with serious people in sensible suits were instead filled with service uniforms weighed down by stacks and stacks of ribbons and hardware. The serious suits were still there, from national security agencies, but they were shunted to the ends of the table. Colonel Weller was in his uniform too, sitting at a table in the middle of the loop, answering some very pointed questions about his misadventures at a small fishing pond on the edge of Millie Salmon's neighborhood. An underling was sifting through exhibits as Weller presented to the tribunal. Simmons sat against the back wall with the stenographer. The current exhibit was a litany of lost and damaged equipment, plus expenses. The colonel had not been lying when he listed to the Salmons the number of pieces of machinery that his group destroyed in the early hours of their mobilization. Over the months since, quite a bit more equipment went down the drain. The site and project had been labeled Wolverine 0011 Beta. All the waste had Simmons nicknamed the project Holy Broke. Only in his head, though. Tracking the progress of the cleanup and restoration around the pond had become Special Agent Simmons' full-time assignment. By his count, the cost in equipment, time, and human power backing up the colonel's project amounted to boring a hole through a mountain. On Mars. Simmons had tracked every dollar and contract flowing in and out of the project, dutifully noting to superiors where the overruns appeared. A century of thinking toxic waste would just disappear with enough dirt over top was proving disastrously, expensively wrong. However, that was not the line of questioning that this tribunal was going after. Their questions were not about ducks stuck in plastic or wads of something bubbly 100 feet under the sod. They wanted to know about the national security failures that allowed anyone outside of the military to know what kind of chemicals were stuck in the ground in the first place. This didn't sit well with Special Agent Simmons. Agent Simmons had wanted to join the FBI since he was a child, completely due to watching Mulder and Scully solve mysteries on the X-Files. The supernatural and alien explanations of Mulder never sat well with Simmons. He wanted to follow the scientific rigor and medical precision of Scully, as did most girls who followed in her footsteps. Things dropped in college, both dead names and medical majors, so there was not going to be any autopsies. Instead, a few graduations later, Special Agent Simmons would bring Scully-like rigor to forensic accounting. Simmons made a career in finding the tiny numbers that brought big fraudsters to justice. Yet there was still that voice of Mulder in Simmons' head, that peripheral sense, always aware of the gaps where conspiracy and cover-up could form. Here, with the military, it wasn't just a gap, it was a straight-up goal. Weller was introducing yet another angle of the surveillance taken inside the decontamination tents near the Wolverine 0011 Beta site, trying to show how thorough his own research had been, yet how mysterious the Salmon's actions were. For the 10th time in the presentation, they watched Jules Salmon use his phone, and the feed cut off. Weller went back to a refrain he had been using on the Salmons: unidentified, panoply, non-state digital menace, or UPNM. Simmons did not see such mystery, much less one requiring such a terrible acronym. Jules Salmon could guess the weak security of an ad hoc military installation and use an off-the-shelf widget to fry it. Probably one he had in a desk drawer given his electrical engineering degree. Stony Salmon was a director at a local bank who had mortgages come across her desk for properties around here with groundwater contamination. It didn't take a forensic accounting of their transcripts to find these connections, even if Special Agent Simmons had gone through them anyway. No, the only weird thing about the Salmons was how positively nondescript they were. Special Agent Simmons, after 20 years of sifting through records of everything from the most egregiously obvious frauds to the most elaborate and well-hidden financial subterfuges, had never seen anything as perfectly unspotless as the Salmon's history. Everyone's financial history has little hiccups and irregularities. They come at times of stress and change. A friend in the hospital means stress eating out a couple of times, then a forgotten phone payment. The bills stack up before and after a vacation. A good couple weeks at work or a tax return means piles of new receipts. Events and paperwork bunch like an accordion. Simmons worked hard to pull them apart and make the music fall out. The Salmon's records had all those burps of a missed payment here and there over Jules' 45 years, Stoney's 47 years, and Monty's 70 years. Millie's financial track record only showed a college fund and an early saver bank account. Weirdly, the Salmon's hiccups were completely random, like someone scattered a few burps just to make them look realistic, or fake records generated with just enough noise to be imperfect. And they were strangely easy to find, cracked open in publicly accessible databases. If it wasn't so nondescript, it would be dangerously sloppy personal financial security or a diversion. To contrast, the Tarascals had an entire novel of documents that screamed out for more information. The boy Reggie, who had been picked up with Millie Salmon, was part of a family that made a small industry out of sealed divorces, redacted documents, and locked police reports. But their financials and history was locked down, away from Minnie to see. This would have gone completely unnoticed by most agents. It had been a weird draw that Simmons was on the field office assignment desk during the cooked goose incident. Literally, he was just covering the on-call shift for a field agent who had an anniversary tickets to the opera. Simmons' forensic accounting expertise would not normally be in play for this strange little investigation. No one in the Bureau would have the inclination to investigate the Salmon's records further. But that wasn't what Colonel Weller was doing. He wasn't arguing the Salmons should be looked into because they were too perfect. He was trying to paint these people as an absolute threat. The colonel was in front of this tribunal trying to argue that 2 + 2 = imminent peril to truth, justice, and the American way. Weller was moving into his final press. These technologies held by private, non-state actors represent an asymmetric advantage by a single family over the United States' current surveillance and reconnaissance abilities. This was shown by multiple concerted breaches in military security, so therefore must be investigated by the military. Colonel Weller closed his presentation. The heads around the horseshoe nodded. Then they called Special Agent Simmons to take his seat next to Colonel Weller. The Bureau's lead person around the table was charged with asking Simmons the questions. She was a person with the word assistant in her title, but it was a measure of relationship to the president, not some middle manager. Simmons did not have a presentation, having only been asked to respond to the tribunal about his filed reports. All his answers showed the whole revelation, incident, and cleanup at Wolverine 0011 Beta went terrible. Without looking at Colonel Weller, Simmons could tell that these were not the answers or questions that the soldier appreciated. There was the lost equipment, the fried electronics, and the general embarrassment at being handed his hat by some random neighborhood parents. Now the colonel wanted that family. Special Agent Simmons' superior finally asked the big question. Would your reports and observation of events at Wolverine 0011 Beta site support the issuance of a national security warrant against Stoney and Jules Salmon? The reports show an excessive amount of waste and inefficiency surrounding the work to clean up Site Wolverine 0011 Beta. This appears to be from management and supply issues rather than any external threat. So, would you oppose a national security warrant to surveil the Salmons? No, I do not oppose it, Simmons said. Colonel Weller looked shocked. But Special Agent Simmons considered for a minute the gift he was about to give Weller. The colonel would not see it as a gift. He'd see it as meddling and over-involvement by this paper-pusher agent. But the colonel's blunt techniques resulted in massive inefficiency and missing crucial points. They'd need to be more surgical, not knock on the Salmon's front door with a bulldozer. Agent Simmons completed his thought. But there is evidence that the Salmons interfered with that investigation. A warrant should be limited to surveillance on the Salmon's phones and computer system of the bookstore. I have seen no evidence to suggest that there is wrongdoing to be found outside of those systems. There it is. Weller would get his toys, and Simmons could piggyback to see the answers to the important questions of what the Salmons were trying to hide in plain sight. Don't have to worry about wasting Bureau time or resources tracking some broad network of people or expansive and fruitless scope. Don't have to worry about the colonel slogging through months more mud to miss the point again. The horseshoe of uniforms and suits assented to the request and the limits. Colonel Weller scowled at Special Agent Wesley Simmons, collected his underling, and left the room. Among all the other equipment the military had given to Weller, they would now add some high-end surveillance apparatus to break into the Salmon's digital lives. Rafaela Hawkins carried 2 tote bags of files plus an extra stack of papers into the teacher's lounge. She piled them onto the shared table in the middle of the room. Jennifer Blitz was playing on her phone, flipping through images of new roller derby skates, and leaned back in one of the lounge's new, expansive lounge chairs. You look laden, the science teacher observed. What are all these? Mitchell has me on the committee doing the assignments for this wave of grants we just got. Some switch flipped, and now there's so much money coming into the school, but all these foundations want their forms filled out. Hey, it was one of those grants that got us these sweet new chairs. Blitz gave the lounger a spin. So much better than that old crap, and my room is getting dual video projectors. A couple papers are worth getting rid of all that. She flipped her fingers at the remnants of the old lounge furniture, 30-year-old repurposed hospital seating. It was wrapped in cellophane, labeled for surplus, and waiting on the Central District Facilities staff to come and move it. Hawkins took her turn to wave at her pile of files. This isn't just a couple papers, Jennifer. This is a full-time job. You're a math teacher. Numbers come naturally. You're a science teacher. Getting hit by a car comes naturally. Blitz scowled and flipped through her phone for a moment. Who else is on that committee? Just me. Everyone else that was asked deferred because, in their words, they didn't want to take the honor from me. Apparently, all the applications for these grants highlighted my, and I quote, contributions to the education of children, pets, and the environment. Quite the honor. Hawkins did not add the surprising, new, and strangely specific exemption in the teacher's contract for time spent pursuing honors. I wasn't asked. Do you? Absolutely not. I don't want to take the honor from you. So much had changed since the absolute riot at the school 2 weeks before. Riot, of course, was Hawkins' word. Everyone else had taken to referring to the unleashed and unsanctioned student fracas as a social readjustment. It prompted several days of introspection and meetings among the administration. To be honest, the first day was a lot of angry teachers. Then a check showed up, comically large, accompanied by the public relations person from a local insurance firm. It was a huge grant. Behind the check were dozens more, then an army of construction workers, technology advisors, education consultants, and at least one celebrity chef who swarmed and began remaking the building. The entire science wing, including the classroom of Jennifer Blitz here, was getting, if Hawkins read the grant correctly, a particle accelerator from the generous contribution of some spacefaring tech billionaires foundation. The gymnasium was being refit with a pool, hot yoga studio, and spin bicycle room. Teachers were being shuffled into shared classrooms in corners of the auditorium as their classrooms were being quickly updated to the newest toys and theories in education. Any discussion of a riot as a riot disappeared. Hawkins had read the award correctly, along with every sheet of paper in each of these stacks and a good amount more that filled her classroom and living room. She filled out every form assigned to her dutifully. She would support all these changes at the school, working tirelessly until every printed square begging for a number was correctly filled in. She would continue to do so, even though one thing hadn't changed. Those stacks of paper were the only new thing in Hawkins' room. The entire school was being reshaped around her. Even other math teachers were getting powerful new tablets and access to the university's imaging software. Not Hawkins. One correction, she did get a single package of inappropriately sparkly pencils and more inappropriate spiral-bound drawing pads. And she had the task of tracking all those moving pieces for everyone except herself. Principal Mitchell knew there was no honor in this task and was purposeful in landing it on Hawkins' desk. Between the assigned extra work and the omission of her room and the drawing pads, she knew she was being punished for upsetting Millie Salmon, a punishment within the exact confines of the teacher's contract. Art teacher Max Flan came into the lounge. He was bright and chipper. "Good morning, Rafaela. Good morning, Jennifer." Flan was one of those moving pieces currently occupying half of the library, while his room was outfit as something called a Multimedia Education Arts Technologies Showcase and Performance Atelier. The acronym MEAT SPA was lost on everyone except Hawkins. Flan put 2 pods in the new hot chocolate machine and waiting for his beverage to brew. "Rafaela, did Millie Salmon get you that image she drew?" "Yes, she did," Rafaela said. It came out more exasperated and displeased than she wanted. Flan didn't notice. "Excellent. She showed me drafts while it was in process. She wanted to make sure it was not too much of a caricature. I thought she had done such a lovely job." Unfortunately, it was an incredibly well done picture. "It did make it to me. Thank you, Max." I know it's hard when the kids find and latch on to a soft spot. Flan. It's not like I haven't heard all sorts of dessert jokes. And worse. But she took your nickname with the kids and turned it from fear and menacing to something soaring and positive. You are the hawk, ever purposeful and vigilant for the children in your class. I thought the picture did such a good job encompassing your totality. Flan got himself caught up in the description of art, crescendoed with a series of wiggling fingers and sniffs, then settled back into whatever world he left to other people. I know you were so upset for what you did to her, triggering the social readjustment. She did so well creating an olive branch to build peace with you. Hawkins watched this performance with complete dispassion, then let out a hard and dismissive sigh. It was an appreciated gesture. Hawkins did appreciate it, but never would it be an olive branch or even the apology Millie Salmon said it was. Hawkins saw it as an attempt to do anything except face real consequences for leaving class. It may have also been a public cover for that salmon child to exact these petty revenges. But this school just allowed these children to make a mockery of discipline, and now their riot was being applauded as a turning point towards a bright future for the school. Hawkins' opinion was not a popular one right now. She returned to looking at her piles of forms. Blitz continued her scrolling and light spinning in the comfy chair. Flan said, "Have a great day," at both colleagues and took his beverage out of the lounge. He passed Reggie Tarascal at the door, holding it open for the student. Reggie said good morning to the teacher, asked about his weekend, and they shared a good laugh. The child then went over to pour himself a coffee from the pot on the warmer. He added some French vanilla cream from the fridge, from a box labeled with his name. He gave some nods and a small wave before heading back out to the hall. "He is a menace," Hawkins said. She had a very good idea where all this extra work originated. "I do like these new chairs," Blitz replied, still relaxed and scrolling on her phone. Tokely Owls wore welding glasses all the time. Not that he was putting together steel, but because he thought they looked appealing. They did not. His tiny round skull on top of a tiny round body made the goggles look like pressure valves on an explosive undersea mine. However, he was actually welding at this moment, or at least fusing metal to metal with drippy hot other metal. It wasn't really welding, it was intricate soldering for a very large circuit. But Tokely wore the goggles anyway and pretended he could see through them. He could not. The butler stood off to the right. He had been waiting for some indeterminate amount of time. Tokely did not like his time wasted, so he didn't like wasting other people's time. However, the butler was not wasting time. He was fulfilling his duty to the manor. So he waited. Tokely continued soldering. This was the 5th circuit that he had recreated in as many days. 4 others stood vertically in the holding case to his right, ready to do real work when the new machine was reassembled. There were 30 more circuits to recreate. The last machine had done its job, then suddenly didn't. Tokely's new laboratory was carved out of the stables on Captain Listing's property. Looking at Tokely's situation, none of those words made sense in reality, so we'll work in reverse order to understand them. Captain Listing's property was a planet. One whole planet. Sure, there were other places on the planet where people lived, but they were just bedrooms whose occupants got shuttled to serve this main palace. The stables could have been holding pens for a dozen mastodons. They ceased being stables when it was discovered that, No matter how horse-like you think an animal looks, it's not necessarily a horse. Therefore, it cannot be raced, bred, fed, and tended like a horse. 3 stories tall and well over the weight of a building, these animals, called forzens, could have been formidable racers and amazing draft animals. But they also liked stepping on anyone who thought they were a forzen trainer, so the stables had been empty. Tokely took over the stable about a week ago when his prior lab ceased existing in this universe. His prior lab had been a lot closer to the main manor. It had sat on a trunk line of electricity and connectivity. In that prior lab, Tokely built a functioning portal that did several things. It emanated the illusion that it was a nondescript door in the middle of a very important city. It accessed the computer system of a certain nondescript second-hand bookshop. And it prepared to clutch and hold the tether of the second-hand bookshop when that establishment showed itself for the interdimensional portal it was and got suckered into connecting to the freestanding door he had built. It caused Tokely some amusement that he named the last part the second hand. Lure the pretend shop with an open palm of one hand, then clutch it with the second hand. It was a pun that he thought Master Pilling would find amusing, and Tokely was pleased to use it against him. He had been getting close to making that connection for a while. He had been ramping up the assault on the shop, waiting for the second hand to strike. He could see from his readings that his fake door was giving off all the signals that drew the shop into his trap. So close. So close. Then it just blew a relay. He could see that the shop, the real shop, was preparing to respond to him. But something about his door didn't match the usual shop protocol, and at the last second, the shop detached and went into hiding from all Tokely sensors. He may have even triggered it to go into standby mode. Unfortunately, that kind of power, what it took to draw the door to a place, was left hanging in the room. His fake door released a tidal wave of energy that, if seen from the safe distance of an orbiting telescope on the other side of the galaxy, was a lovely periwinkle-colored heart-shaped emoji broadcast across every spectrum. The physical structure of his lab and all the grass and trees for a circle 3 times its size simply up and decided to not be anymore. It only spared him because, well, he wasn't entirely sure. Maybe it was the goggles. He'd stick with that. Next test for the next door would be outside from a bit more distance to make sure that didn't happen again. So irritatingly close. He split a metal nut that he was trying to tighten. It was an extremely slender wafer of metal, and he went a half turn too far while thinking of just how close they had been to capturing the shop. Tokely called over the butler. From the stack on the butler's gold platter, Tokely peeled off a piece of paper. Requisition Form 9928, it said. He completed the completely worthless paper to request a replacement for the nut he just split. The butler fed the completed sheet into a slot on the front of his tray. Within a minute, a second butler, this one younger, but with just as thinning hair, appeared to the door of the stable. He carried a shoebox-sized, velvet-lined case. In each of the divided, also velvet-lined sections, there was a shiny metallic nut. Tokely had become used to this. He brought out his calipers and measured the offered nuts. One was exactly the right size. Tokely signed the requisition form, took the receipt, and added the nut to his machine. Paperwork. Tokely had filled out the forms to requisition the power, materials, the very life force of the planet to construct the first door, and now had to do it over again for this new door. During the day, his requisition forms had trucks and laborers moving earth around the stables to make a new connection to the massive power grid. In the evening, his requisition forms were causing rolling blackouts across the planet to charge the capacitors he would need for the final push. His library of requisitions were drawing the library of the universe that existed in the shop. He filled them out dutifully. It was a punishment Tokley deserved. His work at the university had gone on years too long. It had become obvious he was just occupying space, collecting enough salary for parts and food, then putting off lectures and stewing in the basement of the engineering building. A recruiter called, life-saving recruiter. 5 years ago now, he spent so many days in that gutted basement trying to rewire a door, trying to recreate what it had been when Jules Montaigne left, when Jules Montaigne purposefully detached the shop from anything Tokley had built. Tokley tried so many combinations to pretend his next door was built by someone else. None of them worked. The shop kept figuring out it was Tokley and dumping the connection. Until now, he wasn't avoiding Jules' prohibition anymore. He was using the shop's programming to come to him. He was much closer to reclaiming the shop than he had ever been. That recruiter had saved him. Tokley could leave the university without being fired, which would have been a death knell on his already wavering academic career. Tokley hadn't even asked about the position, just took the offer. Admittedly, the very posh shuttle to the spaceport was a nice selling point. The even nicer private Starliner sold the deal before Tokley even knew what the job was for. Then, after more than a week of transit, Tokley was set face to face with Lord Captain Elliot Darrell's listing. His official title had a few more words. Tokley didn't hear because he knew who this was. He knew the name from Stony Salvia. This had been a song at Brentone. Listing's story versus the shop involved cannon fire and a talking dog. For a second, Tokley wondered if they still told that tale. Then he wondered if they had the last Brentone. Good riddance, Tokley thought, hoping all of them left crying and got food poisoning. He felt a short pang of loss that he decided was anger, then edited it to being hunger. He filled out a dinner requisition form, scanned it on the butler's tray, and sat back down. Solder, 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 a knock at the stable door. Dinner arrived in a velvet box, which is weird for buttermilk soup and cheese biscuit sandwich. After 5 years of the same meal twice a day, it wasn't weird. Even with the Manor's kitchen staff and access to any food in the system, this was exactly what he wanted. Even if it hadn't been on velvet, Tokley signed for the requisition and kept the receipt. He ate as best he could with a hand in the new machine and another holding food. Really no complaints on the trappings of wealth here. Plates were gold-lined, meals were garnished with green things, schedules adhered, sometimes with extreme rigor. Tokley's mechanic brain appreciated that part. Captain Listing wanted the library of the universe, and he was willing to give Tokley all the resources to get it. Tokley was not wanting. Even with all this wealth, he did not waste. Early in his machine constructing phase, he welled up the courage to requisition a new apron. He had been told that, as the new and only senior fellow of the West T. Highland Engineering College, all his material needs would be taken care of. But that still felt weird to ask the boss for something so personal as socks, toothbrush, or a mechanic's apron. So he didn't ask his boss. He filled out a requisition form. What he received was an outfit of the finest lush pelts and overwhelmingly soft nanocarbon weave. He re-requisitioned another apron, this time plainly stating flat, clean plant fiber to be used once and re-requisitioned later with 2 pockets. That got him the heavy denim apron he had been hoping. He had used it for the last 5 years. It had pockets. He had kept the requisitioned plush apron, sewing it into a new pillow and comforter for his bed. That was how much fabric was in that outfit. Tokely did not waste. It ended up being a very comfortable pillow. It was on top of a very plush bed, one he made fluffier, stuffed with the shredded scrap receipts from his thousands of requisitions. But all that had vaporized in a blink last week, when Tokely was left standing in the middle of a completely barren circle of non-matter. His fingers were still extended to twist a knob and try and improve the information he was receiving from his door and the second hand. Explosions are supposed to make sounds. Vaporizing an acre of structures, electronics, and estate hedges was deafening in its silence. So much work disappeared without a trace. His next door would not vaporize unnoticed. Captain Listing would get his Library of the Universe. Tokely would get back his access to his shop. Pilling and Salvia and Montaigne would find themselves locked out. If this worked, no, when this worked, and he was close, Tokely would splurge and order double buttermilk soup along with a brand new apron. This was Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop, Chapter 15, Villainous Bureaucracy. In the next episode, Mom derails Millie's plans in the most appealing way possible. Thank you for listening. You can find more about Millie Salmon at milliesalmon.com or join us on Patreon. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review on whichever podcast app you use. Millie Salmon and the Infinite Shop is a production of Infinite Shop Limited, which you can find and follow on all social media platforms. I'm Ray Dubicki. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading some more for you soon.